What is up, everybody? We are back with another March Madness video, and today we are going to be making our predictions for the upcoming NCAA tournament based on the current bracketology projections. Let's jump into it. Alright, so for today's video, we're going to be on ESPN looking at Joe Lunardi's most up-to-date bracketology for the 2025 NCAA tournament. And before we jump into our predictions, let's look at who he has on the bracket watch. So currently, as the top overall seed, none other than the Auburn Tigers. We all expected it, the most dominant team in college basketball so far this season, and rightfully deserves to be there as the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament if it were to start today. Then his first team out is the Oklahoma Sooners. So in our last video, they were in the field, now no longer as the first team out. And then we see Wake Forest moving on in as the last team in. And to look at the full bubble picture, we can see right now at the last 4 byes, he has Texas, West Virginia, San Diego State, and Nebraska. Last 4 in is Vanderbilt, Arkansas, VCU, Wake Forest, and then first 4 out, Oklahoma, SMU, Georgia, North Carolina, and next 4 out is Xavier, Indiana, Boise State, and Pittsburgh. So we see teams like Oklahoma and Georgia, who were previously in the bracket in our last video, no longer in that first 4 out section. And then a team like VCU out of the A10 that has now moved their way in to the last 4 in and making it into the field of 68. Let's jump into our predictions. Jumping into the South region, we have none other than the #1 overall seed Auburn Tigers taking on either Omaha or Southeast Missouri State in the 16 seed. And this one is a no-brainer for me. I got the Auburn Tigers. Even after losing against Florida at home, they went on a 3-game winning streak that they're currently on, beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa, as well as beating a tough Arkansas team. Still the #1 team in the AP poll in a lot of the metrics. I just can't see a world where Auburn would lose the first game against a 16 seed, so give me the Tigers moving on. And they'll either be taking on Gonzaga or New Mexico, which is just 2 amazing teams when it comes to scoring the basketball. Both top 20 in points per game right now. Gonzaga top 10 in offense efficiency as well, and they're also tied for first in assists per game. I really like this matchup, expect it to be a high-scoring affair, but I got to take the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I can't see a world where Mark Few doesn't make it to at least the second round of the NCAA tournament, especially after going to 9 straight Sweet 16s. So give me Gonzaga to advance to the round of 32. Next, we got Marquette versus McNeese, and this is going to be a good game as well. McNeese Cowboys, coached by Will Wade, top 75 in offense and defense, going up against a tough Marquette team led by Cam Jones. They are 2-3 in their last 5 games, losing against UConn, St. John's, and Creighton, so the other really good Big Ten teams. But Cam Jones and the Marquette Golden Eagles are going to be a little too much for this McNeese team, so give me Marquette moving on in this one. Then we get to Michigan State versus High Point. Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans have been one of the surprises out of the Big Ten. We all thought they were going to be decent, but right now currently second in the Big Ten standings, and that's in large part to this team can not only defend, but they're actually good on the offensive end as well. However, they do struggle to shoot the 3, and that's where I think this High Point team might be able to get them. High Point currently 12-2 in the Big South on a 9-game winning streak, and they're top 30 in offensive rating and efficiency and average 82 points per game. We've seen Michigan State score that, but not a whole lot, so I want to take High Point in this one to move on and advance to the next round. Up next, we have the #6 seed Louisville going up against either Arkansas or VCU, and in that 11 seed matchup in the first 4, I like Arkansas to win this one. I think VCU has been great so far this year, and it would be impressive if 2 A10 teams get into the tournament, but I think the athleticism that this Arkansas Razorbacks team has, as well as this talent that they have, is going to be able to take them over the top. So give me Arkansas in that matchup. And then going up against Louisville, I love what Pat Kelsey has done so far. Currently on a 4-game winning streak, top 30 in both offense and defense in the country, and tied for second in the ACC. But I think the Arkansas Razorbacks may be a little too much for this team. Remember, Louisville suffered a big injury with Cason Pryor going out earlier this year. I think Arkansas might be able to take advantage of that, and so I got the Razorbacks advancing to the round of 32. Next, we got Kentucky going up against Chattanooga, and Kentucky is such a high-scoring, high-powered offense. They have Jackson Robinson, Kobe Brea, Tega Owe, 3-1 in their last 4 with a win against Tennessee, and their only loss being a close one at Texas. Top 5 in offense, but the defense is what really hurts Kentucky. They're able to score with everybody, but sometimes they can't stop them. And going up against a tough Chattanooga team out of the SoCon, but I don't think that's going to give too much issue for the Wildcats. So give me Kentucky to advance in this one. Memphis versus Nebraska. We just saw Memphis lose against Wichita State in overtime to break their 8-game winning streak. Rebounding and turnovers are a big issue for this Memphis Tigers team and something they're going to have to fix come tournament time. But we also just saw Nebraska get blown out at Penn State in their last game, and they're horrible defending the 3, and which is something I think Memphis is going to be able to take advantage of. You got PJ Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter, Colby Rogers, 3 guards that are just able to score and get to their spots and get buckets when they want. And so I got the Memphis Tigers beating the Nebraska Cornhuskers in this one. And then in the last matchup in the first round, we got Houston versus Montana. And this is just like the first one we talked about with Auburn. I don't think there's going to be any issues for this Houston Cougars team. LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp have been playing insane. Number 1 team in the Big 12 right now, and to go along with a great defense, they also have a top 7 offense according to KenPom. Give me Houston moving on to the next round. All right, we got Auburn versus Gonzaga in our first matchup of the round of 32, and talk about 2 stacked lineups. You got Gonzaga coming out here with RJ Nembhard, Graham Ike, Nolan Hickman, and then obviously Auburn coming right back with Janiah Broome, who could be the player of the year, Chad Baker Mazzara, Tahad Pettiford. This Gonzaga team can score and score a lot, but we saw this Auburn team do the exact same thing when they played a great offense like Alabama. So I don't see the Auburn Tigers having any issues, and I see them beating Gonzaga and ending their streak of 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances. So give me the Tigers advancing to the second weekend. And then we got Marquette versus High Point, and I really like this High Point team, as I mentioned earlier, currently on a 9-game winning streak, and Alan Huss has had this team playing well not only this year, but also last year, winning the regular season, but just missing out in the tournament. But I think this Marquette team might be a little too much. Cam Jones having a great season, 19-4-5, and I expect the shooting numbers to come up as well for Cam Jones, struggling a bit there. But then you also have David Joplin, Stevie Mitchell, Ben Gold, just all the other players that the Golden Eagles can hit you with, and that's why I'm going to pick Marquette in this matchup. Then we have Arkansas and Kentucky, Coach Cal, and the storyline of him going back and playing Kentucky in the tournament. He got them in the first round this season when they played at Kentucky, but I don't think he's going to get him again. Give me the Kentucky Wildcats to beat the Arkansas Razorbacks in this one. Mark Pope in the team just a little too much, can score a little too well. I don't know if Arkansas can keep up with it, so give me Kentucky. And then in the last matchup, we got Memphis versus Houston. And I don't think Memphis goes any further after this, especially after watching them lose to Wichita State. Houston is playing great, like one of the best teams in the country, and rightfully so, ranking really high in all the metrics as well, which is why I have Houston moving on to the Sweet 16. Our first matchup of the Sweet 16 is the Auburn Tigers going up against the Marquette Golden Eagles, and my biggest question for Marquette is who's going to stop Janiah Broome in this one. David Joplin's a good defender, but the way that Janiah Broome has been playing so far has been absolutely amazing. Also, combine that if they do put their best big defender on Janiah Broome, you got the likes of Chaney Johnson, who has just been an emerging star for this team. Scored 20 points a couple of times so far, and in the past couple of games, it's just been playing super well on the offensive end. So I got Auburn moving on in this one, and they'll be taking on either Kentucky or Houston. In my last bracket, I had Kentucky making it all the way to the Final Four, but the way Houston is looking right now, I don't know if Kentucky's going to make it that far. The Houston defense is for real, and combine that with a really good offense that they have right now and the way that they're playing, I just really like Houston to move on in this matchup. And in the Elite Eight, we have the rematch of Auburn versus Houston. Auburn got Houston in the first matchup, and I think they get them again with Auburn moving on to the Final Four. Up next, we have the Midwest region where we see Alabama staying as a number 1 seed, even though they've lost their last 2 games to Auburn and Missouri. But I don't expect Alabama to have any issues when it comes to Bryant. Just too much of a high-powered offense for Bryant to keep up with. So give me Alabama to move on in this matchup. They'll take on the likes of either Oregon or Baylor, which would be a really good game. Oregon Ducks, Dana Altman has this team playing extremely well as of late, 3-game win streak, but hasn't been against the best competition, as all of these Big Ten teams that they beat are not projected to make the tournament. Going up against a Baylor Bears team that has just struggled with injuries a lot this season. Langston Love has been in and out of the lineup. Same with Jeremy Roach. There are other big. Josh Ojinawa is out for the season, and they've been flip-flopping for the past 8 games, going 4-4, but they do have a high-powered offense, top 15 in offensive rating, and the reason I'm picking the Baylor Bears in this one is for VJ Edgecombe, who's the absolute X factor. A great freshman guard, has been putting on a show as of late, so give me VJ Edgecombe and the Baylor Bears to move on past the Ducks. That takes us to Maryland versus Drake, and I'm really high on this Drake team. Love the story about Ben McCollum. First season there, coming from the D2 ranks, bringing a lot of his players as well, specifically Bennett Sturts, who's been one of the best offensive players in the nation out of Drake, 19 points per game, 6 assists per game. They actually slow the game down, slowest adjusted to tempo in the country, according to KenPom, and get really good shots, but against a Maryland team that has just the twin towers of Derek Queen and Julian Reese, I don't think Drake has the size, no matter if they slow the game down or not. I really think this Maryland team is going to be able to have their way with them. So give me Maryland moving on past the Drake Bulldogs. Then we got Rick Pitino and the Johnnies taking on the number 13 seed Jacksonville State. Again, Ray Harper, Jacksonville State. Great season out of Conference USA, leading that league right now. But Rick Pitino and the Johnnies have been such a fun story to watch this season. In their 4 losses, they have only lost them by a combined 7 points. So the Johnnies, even when they're losing, are just in every single game. Lead the Big East by 2.5 games right now. Just the front runners to win that league. Honestly, I expect the Johnnies maybe to move up into a 3 seed range, but we'll see if that comes around. But they're moving on past Jacksonville State in this matchup. Up next, we got Ole Miss versus UC San Diego, and I think it's going to be a great matchup if this were to happen. You got Ole Miss led by Chris Beard and his star guard Sean Padula, the transfer from Virginia Tech, leads the team in points, assists, and steals to go alongside the front court of Dia and Brakefield, taking on the UC San Diego Tritons team that's on an 8-game winning streak, 13-2 in the Big West, and leading that conference. And this team is good all over the place. Top 50 in offense and defense. I like what UC San Diego has been doing, and I'm actually going to pick the upset here. So give me the Tritons to upset Ole Miss in this first round matchup. And then we got Arizona versus Utah Valley, and Tommy Lloyd in his 3 seasons that he's been at Arizona, he just knows how to win. Also being the top of his conferences, both in the Pac-12, now in the Big 12, being second alone in the Big 12 currently. This team, 7-2 in their last 9. Wins against Iowa State and Texas Tech in that stretch. And, we know the likes of Caleb Love is an offensive type of player, but they're pretty often balanced in both offense and defense, which is why I like this team to make a little bit of a run in March Madness this year. Give me Arizona Wildcats over Utah Valley. Then we go on where we see a struggling Kansas Jayhawk team going up against an Ohio State team that's lost their last 2 games as well. So Bill Self, Kansas Jayhawks, been a rough season as of late, 1-3 in their last 4, with losses against Kansas State, Utah, and BYU by 34 points, which is just absolutely ridiculous for a Kansas Jayhawk team. I mean, they were the preseason number 1 team in America, and that has not looked to be the case whatsoever this year. It's just a cause of transfers not meshing or not being what you expected, which has been really hard to watch for the Jayhawks. But they're going up against an Ohio State team that, they lost to Northwestern by 21 in their last game as well. Jake Diebler, first season since taking over for Chris Holtman, has this team tied for 9th in the Big Ten. I really don't like either of these teams right now currently, but if I had to pick, I'm just going to trust Bill Self a little bit, but it's really hard to pick this Kansas team. So I do have them advancing, though, to the round of 32. They'll be taking on either Wisconsin or Norfolk State, and Wisconsin has been the talk of the town as of late. John Tonji is a name that you need to know. 19.6 points per game, scored 30 recently as well, just an absolute beast and can score at any part of the court. Wisconsin, best free throw shooting team in the nation, which is not something you talk about a lot of times, but when it comes to the tournament, free throws are key, which is why I have Wisconsin moving on in this one. Then we have Alabama versus Baylor in our first matchup, and I think this Alabama offense is just going to be a little too much for the Baylor Bears. They have a good offense in their own right, but Alabama can just keep putting in piece by piece and scoring at will, and I don't know if Baylor is going to be able to keep up with it, especially with all the injuries that they face, and if they face any more, I just don't think they have any shot to beat this Crimson Tide team. Then we have Maryland versus St. John's, which are two teams I'm extremely high on right now. Maryland has looked so good behind Derek Queen, the 6'10 freshman, who's really going under the radar, and I don't know why. Probably because he's not necessarily the prototypical big that you see in the NBA, but this guy can move as well. He's been very impressive. But I do like Kadari Richmond, RJ Luis, and the St. John team to move on in this matchup. Again, they are just in every single game, and to go alongside just a great team. They're third ranked in defense right now and eighth in rebounding. So even though this Maryland team might have a little bit of size on them, I don't expect that to be too much an issue for the Johnnies. So give me St. John's to move on to the second weekend. Then you got UC San Diego versus Arizona, two teams out west. I really like this matchup between the two. I think UC San Diego can keep up with Arizona in scoring, but I think Arizona's defense might be a little too much in this one and able to maybe make that much of a difference that's going to give the Wildcats the win here. Then we have Kansas versus Wisconsin in this matchup. I felt like I had to pick Kansas in the first round, but I don't in this next round. Give me Wisconsin. What Greg Gard and the Badgers have been doing have been amazing so far. Third in the Big Ten. I don't think Kansas is going to have enough offense to stay with one of the best offenses in the country here at Wisconsin. So give me them to move on to the second weekend. That brings us into the Sweet 16 where we see Alabama and Nate Oates take on St. John's and Rick Pitino. And honestly, I can't think of two teams that are just polar opposites. St. John's with the defensive mindset, really not the best at shooting threes, honestly, below 30%, going up against an Alabama team that is just all offense all the time, all the numbers, and shooting as many threes as they can. And in this one, I'm going to pick Alabama to prevail. And the reason being is they've been here. They know what it takes. Mark Sears is one of the best players in the country. I just like the pieces that Alabama has a little bit better than St. John's, although it's hard to pick against Rick Pitino. I think Nate Oates and the Crimson Tide can do it, which is why I got Alabama advancing to the Elite Eight, where they'll take on either Arizona or Wisconsin. This is going to be a high-scoring affair. As I mentioned earlier, Wisconsin, one of the best offenses in the country, going up against an Arizona team that has a great offense, but honestly pretty balanced on both sides of things. Can Caleb Love make his team go to a Final Four? I don't know, but I'm going to get them moving on into the Elite Eight, where they're going to take on Alabama. So we have Alabama versus Arizona. Again, another high-scoring affair. And I'm actually going to have the Arizona Wildcats coming out in this one. Again, I just think the balance of this team this year is going to be game changer when we've seen a little bit of just more of an offensive mindset in years past. Give me Caleb Love, Jaden Bradley, KJ Lewis. Faisar has been a big part of what they've been doing in recent weeks. I like the Wildcats and what they got going, so give me them to beat the Crimson Tide and advance to the Final Four. Moving down to the bottom half of the bracket, we have the West region, and in the first round, we got Florida as the 1 seed going up against Quinnipiac there as the 16 seed, and I don't think Florida is going to have any issues in this one. Give me the Gators to move on. They've been playing extremely well, 8-1 in their last 9 games in the SEC, with wins at Auburn and at Mississippi State, which are two ranked opponents right now. Just night in, night out, Florida Gators are showing up and showing out, which is why the AP voters have also moved them to the number 2 spot currently. So I got the Gators moving on in the first round. Next, they're either going to be taking on UConn or Utah State, which to think that we're talking about UConn as an 8 seed after being back-to-back national champions is crazy, but I do expect UConn to move on past Utah State in the first round. Utah State, a very high scoring offense, 82.5 points per game. But I just really cannot picture a world where Danny Hurley, after winning back-to-back national championships, does not make it past the first round in the NCAA tournament, especially now that they have Liam McNeely back from injury. He's averaging 22 points per game his last 4 games. I really like what Dan Hurley has, although they haven't seen a lot of it. With the team getting healthy and getting back into it, I do think UConn's going to move on in this one. Next, we got Mississippi State versus Yale, and I like what Mississippi State has done in the SEC recently. Won their last 2 games over ranked opponents in Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Really balanced team both on the offense and defensive side, but they're going up against this Yale team that is just absolutely killing it in the Ivy League, 9-0 in their conference on a 10-game win streak. They played Purdue this year and only lost by 8 as well. A really high-scoring team, top 20 in points per game. They're actually 6th in 3-point percentage, so this team can shoot it, which is why I'm picking Yale to upset Mississippi State in the first round and move on to the round of 32. And they're either going to take on Michigan or Lipscomb. And again, Michigan just huge. Starts 2 7-footers in Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden. Also have Trey Donaldson, the transfer from Auburn. They're running the point guard. Currently first in the Big Ten. I don't think this Lipscomb team is going to give them too much issues. So give me Michigan moving on in this one. Clemson versus BYU. Clemson having one of the best wins in all of college basketball this year with their win against Duke. Although it was at home, it's still a very impressive win. 13-2 in the ACC, tied for second right now with Louisville. And Clemson really likes to slow the game down and get quality shots. I think a BYU team that's led by Igor Dimon, who is definitely an NBA prospect, but a freshman. They're 7-2 in their last 9 games, but sometimes they struggle to defend the 3. And if you've seen Chase Hunter from Clemson play, he can straight shoot. I believe he's around 44% right now from 3-point range, which is why I got the Clemson Tigers to move on past BYU in this one. Then we got Texas A&M versus South Alabama out of the Sun Belt. Texas A&M has been having a really good season, tied for 4th in a tough SEC conference and led by none other than Wade Taylor. Texas A&M is actually the number 1 offensive rebounding team, and when it comes to playing in the tournament, sometimes shots aren't falling. You're going to need to get those boards, and I think Texas A&M does against South Alabama, which is one of the big reasons why I have them moving on in this matchup. Then we get to Illinois versus San Diego State, and I can just picture this game being extremely ugly. San Diego State, just a great defensive team, currently have won 7 of their last 8 and a top 10 defense in the country, but going up against one of the more talented teams in the nation in Brad Underwood's Fighting Illini. Kasparis Yakashonis, probably a top 5 pick in this upcoming NBA draft to go alongside the 7-footer Tomislava Visic. You got Will Riley, Kylan Boswell, very talented team. And they're 4-6 in their last 10 games, so haven't been playing extremely well as of late. But I do like just the talent to prevail in this one and get the Fighting Illini into the next round. And then to round out the first round in the West region, we got Iowa State versus Cleveland State. I love Iowa State this year, especially since they've been back from injury, getting 4 straight wins. Momkilovic is finally back, and that was huge for Iowa State to get. And they have a tough game on Saturday against Houston, so we'll have to wait and see, but I expect that to be a close one as well. Give me Iowa State over Cleveland State. Then we got the round of 32 in our first round matchup of Florida versus UConn. Do the back-to-back defending champions make it to the second weekend? By my prediction, no, they do not. This Florida Gators team has been playing insanely well, right up there with Auburn in terms of how they've played in the past month of the season. So give me the Florida Gators. Moving on. Then you have Yale versus Michigan. Danny Wolf, the Yale transfer who is now at Michigan, going up against his former school in the second round, which would be a really cool storyline. And I think Danny Wolf gets the win in this one. Give me Michigan. Moving on. Clemson versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M can be very inconsistent on the offensive side of things. Wade Taylor, a good scorer, but also a volume shooter. I think Chase Hunter, Ian Shefflin, and the Clemson Tiger offense try and slow things down, get quality shots, shorten the game, and I think they end up doing that in winning if this matchup were to happen. Give me Clemson with the upset over the Aggies. And then in the last one, Illinois versus Iowa State. Brad Underwood's team had talent that helped them prevail in the first round, but in the second round against these Cyclones, talent is not going to be a big enough factor. Iowa State in their own right has really good talent in Taman Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert, Curtis Jones, who is their leading scorer, emerging as one of the great scorers in the Big 12 that we've seen this year, and they continue to get it done in the round of 32 against Illinois. Give me the Cyclones. Then we got the Sweet 16 matchup of Florida versus Michigan. I really like this battle of bigs, Danny Wolf versus Alex Condon. Then you also have the guards that are the big X factor for the Florida Gators, some of the best guards in the nation with Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin. Give me the Florida Gators to move past Michigan in this one. And then to round out the Sweet 16, it's Clemson versus Iowa State. Clemson doing big things in the first two rounds, but I don't think they get it done against the Cyclones. Chase Hunter, Ian Shuffling, great players, like I mentioned earlier. Also Victor Locken. But Iowa State bringing in the transfer Joshua Jefferson to bolster up their front court. I think there's just a little too much that Iowa State has there. So give me the Cyclones to win in that one and play Florida in the Elite Eight. And in this matchup, I think it's going to be an amazing game, just like we saw between Auburn and Iowa State in the Maui Invitational earlier. I think this one is going to be just as close. But I actually have the Cyclones getting the edge in this one. They're currently top 10 in defense and top 20 in offense, and Florida's right there with them, so I think this is going to be an absolute nail-biter, but I really like just the defensive intensity that the Iowa State Cyclones bring. TJ Alsterberger has this team playing extremely well now that they're back healthy. If this game were to happen today, I think I'd be picking the Cyclones, but it'd be a very narrow margin, but give me the Cyclones to advance to the Final Four. In our last region, we have the East, where in the first round, we see the number 1 Duke Blue Devils take on either Southern or American there at the 16 seed. Duke, led by stud freshman and predicted number 1 NBA draft pick Cooper Flagg. This team has an unlimited potential, it seems. Not only do you have Flagg, you also have Con Knipple, Kaman Malawach, Tyrese Proctor, who's made a jump as well. They're leading the ACC currently with their only loss coming at Clemson, which is another tournament team we talked about earlier. And they actually moved to the number 1 team in the KenPom rankings, jumping Auburn, which is very impressive. I don't see any issues in this first round matchup. Give me the Blue Devils to advance. Then we have Creighton versus Texas, where we see a Creighton team that's currently tied for second in the Big East, and they've won 9 in a row before dropping their last 2 games. Both were close, but lost to UConn and St. John's. Going up against a Texas team that's led by another stud freshman in Trey Johnson, who's averaging roughly 20 points per game, so one of the best scorers in college right now, and specifically for freshmen. They won their last game versus Kentucky, but were struggling recently, 2-4 in their last 6 games, which is why I'm going to give the nod to Creighton on this one, to have them advance to take on Duke in the second round. Then we have Missouri versus George Mason, and George Mason is one of those trendy upset picks that a lot of people are talking about right now, but I think what Missouri has been doing recently has been extremely impressive, especially their last game against Alabama, scoring 110 and winning that game against the Crimson Tide. One of the best offenses that we see. They score a lot of points, shoot it well, led by some, I'd say, people that have kind of been outcast. We see Mark Mitchell, who was previously at Duke, now they're in Missouri. Same with Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates. I just think the Missouri Tigers have been playing too well as of recently. George Mason, currently on an 11-game winning streak, but again, out of the A10, I do like Missouri to win this one. So give me the Tigers moving on to face either Purdue or Akron. And in my last video, Akron was one of my upset picks, but I do think the Purdue Boilermakers might be a little too much. Led by Braden Smith, maybe the best point guard we see in all of college basketball, but they have been struggling as of late. A 3-game losing streak against a lot of teams that they've been competing for that Big Ten title, Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State. But they have a top 10 offense, which is why I'm going to lean the Purdue Boilermakers in this one to beat Akron and move on to the second round. Then we have UCLA at the 6th seed taking on either Vanderbilt or Wake Forest. And in this Vanderbilt-Wake Forest matchup, I think I'm going to go with Wake Forest in this one. Currently tied for 4th in the ACC, and Hunter Salas is absolute beast on the court as well. I really like what he's doing for him, currently averaging 18.5 points per game, 47% from the field, and they're 4-1 in their last 5, which is a little better than what Vanderbilt has done, losing their last 3, but they were all 2 ranked opponents. So you have Wake Forest taking on UCLA in this one. Although UCLA did have a little bit of a skid there in the middle of the season, they were on a 7-game winning streak, but they've gone 1-2 in their past 3. They do slow the ball down, kind of more defensive minded there for Mick Cronin out of the Big Ten for UCLA. But I do like the Bruins to advance over Wake Forest. And then in our next matchup, we see Texas Tech taking on Towson. Texas Tech has a dude in JT Toppin who has been amazing in the last 4 games, averaging 27 points per game. In their last 2, they beat Oklahoma State by nearly 40 points, but then they just lost at TCU, which was a heartbreaker. It was very close, but really surprising to see that result. Going up against a Towson team out of the CAA. Again, I just don't know if Towson has what it takes to keep up with the Texas Tech Red Raiders in this one, like what they have in Toppin, but also Chase McMillan, Dario Williams. So give me the Texas Tech Red Raiders to move on. Then St. Mary's out of the WCC coming up against West Virginia out of the Big 12. Randy Bennett has himself another solid team, especially led by seniors Augustus Marshallonis and Mitchell Saxon. Currently on a 4-game winning streak and 14-1 in conference play. I mean, they beat Gonzaga in their first matchup, and they're 2 games up on them now, so it looks like St. Mary's is going to be winning the WCC over Gonzaga. They are a really good defensive team. Top 10 or top 15 defense we see in the nation right now. Going up against a West Virginia team that's also defensive-minded, but they've been struggling as of late. They have to lean on star guard Javon Small for everything, especially now that Tucker DeVries is out for the season. Darian DeVries has had a great first season as the West Virginia head coach, but I think it ends here in the first round. Give me St. Mary's to move on in this one. And then we have Tennessee versus Central Connecticut. Tennessee has a really good team, obviously the best defense in the nation, which is why I think they're going to win this matchup. I don't know if Central Connecticut's just going to be able to score on this team. And Tennessee also an improved offensive team as well. So I like Tennessee Volunteers. And then we'll move on to the round of 32, where in our first matchup, we see Duke versus Creighton. Really fun matchup here. Cooper Flagg, Konkinenpel, and specifically there at the center spot, Kaman Malawach, a stud freshman center going up against Ryan Kalkbrenner, one of the best shot blockers we see in all of college basketball. Also a really good scorer from the center spot as well. But I do like the Duke Blue Devils. This team just has a ton of guys they can throw at you. If it's not Cooper's night, it might be Cons. If it's not Cons, you got Tyrese Proctor, Sion James there, a good guard defender to go along with Malik Brown, who is playing well. Hopefully he's okay. Just suffered an injury in their last game, so we'll see if he should be back, but it does look like there are good signs there. So give me the Duke Blue Devils to move past the Blue Jays in this one. Then we got Missouri versus Purdue, and Missouri, as I mentioned earlier, has just really impressed me as of late. One of the best offensive teams going up against a Purdue team that's also really good offense, but Purdue is really bad at defending twos. They're actually in the 300s in all of college basketball, and I think that's due to no more Zach Edey, so no more 7'4" center that you have in your paint. I think that means Mark Mitchell of the Missouri Tigers is going to feast in this matchup. So give me Missouri to beat Purdue. Then you got UCLA taking on Texas Tech. Tech can kind of get done at both ends. Good defensive team, but also have shown that they've been able to score a lot as well, which is why I like them over UCLA in this matchup. I think UCLA is going to try and slow it down, but I think Texas Tech can kind of take control and do what they want there. And then in the last one, we have St. Mary's versus Tennessee. 2 really good defensive teams, as I mentioned earlier, but I think Tennessee's improved offense is going to help them get the win here. So give me the Volunteers to move past the Gales to advance to the second weekend in the Sweet 16. Where in our first matchup, we see Duke versus Missouri, which is a really cool storyline with Mark Mitchell going up against his former team in the Duke Blue Devils. But again, as I mentioned earlier, Duke just has too many guys. And when you need a bucket, look at Cooper Flagg, because it seems like that's what he's done. Although he has struggled in the 3 losses at the end of the game, they did put the ball in his hands. I just don't know if it's necessarily going to be that close, but I think it'll be a good game. But give me the Blue Devils to advance to the Elite 8. Take on either Texas Tech or Tennessee. And this is where I think Tennessee's offense might hurt them a little bit. Again, it's been improved, but this Texas Tech team can score, especially behind the likes of JT Toppin, and then you got Chase McMillan who can shoot it. So I'm going to pick the Red Raiders to move on and face Duke in the Elite Eight, where we see the Duke Blue Devils move on to the Final Four and Cooper Flagg advancing to his first and only probably Final Four. The Blue Devils have just been playing extremely well. Even in their losses, it feels like those were games that they could have and should have won. So, which is why I like the Blue Devils to be the last team in to the Final Four. So in the Final Four, we see Auburn out of the South, Iowa State out of the West, Arizona out of the Midwest, and Duke out of the East. And in our first matchup in the Final Four, we see Auburn versus Iowa State, which is a rematch from the Maui Invitational. And both of these teams are good at defense. Iowa State currently 10th in defensive rating, and Auburn at 11 in defensive rating, according to KenPom. We also have an Auburn team that is the #1 offensive rated team in all of college basketball, and I think that's going to be the difference in this one. Johni Broome, not only is he one of the best players in all of college basketball, but he might have the best supporting cast. We saw it in the Arkansas game the other night. Johni Broome had a good game, but not a great game. But it was just all the supporting pieces around him. You know, whenever it's not him, it's Chaney Johnson. When it's not Chaney Johnson, it's Todd Pettiford. When it's not Todd Pettiford, it's Chad Baker-Mazara. You got Denver Jones, Dylan Carball. They throw so many guys at you. Miles Kelly, I can't forget him. They throw so many guys at you, and they can score in so many different ways. They can also slow the game down if they need to, win in a low-scoring affair or a high-scoring affair. It doesn't matter, which is why I have the Auburn Tigers to win it in this first matchup of the Final Four. They'll be taking on either Arizona or Duke. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the storyline of Caleb Love, the North Carolina transfer, going back to play Duke. And if you remember the last time Caleb Love played Duke in the NCAA tournament, he was the one that sent Coach K home and the Duke Blue Devils packing. Does it happen again? I don't think so. Again, Duke moved past Auburn as the #1 rated team in all of KenPom. They're top 3 in all other rankings, whether it's the AP, the Net, or Bart Torvik. They're one of the best teams with the best records, 23-3 on the season and leading the ACC. They have the overall best net rating as well. And the one thing that the Duke Blue Devils have is they're top 5 in both offensive and defensive rating, which is absolutely crazy. So this team doesn't only score, but they also defend at a very high level. I just think they're better at both aspects of the game than the Arizona Wildcats, which is why I'm picking Duke to win it. And we see the rematch of Auburn and Duke in the national championship. Does Duke win it again, or does Auburn get their revenge? And when I'm looking at this matchup, it's really, can anybody guard Johni Broome? You got Kamal Malawach, who might be able to, but we'll see. They were able to limit him in the first game, but that was in Cameron. Did that have any effect? I think it might have, which is why I'm going to take the Auburn Tigers to be the national champion in this one. And Cooper Flagg's historic freshman season is going to get cut just a little short as the national runner-up. This Auburn Tiger team, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, absolutely dominant, most dominant college basketball team we've seen this season. One of the best seasons we've seen ever. I mean, they have already accumulated 14 quad one wins, only 2 losses, both of those to teams that are there in the top 3 of the rankings. Number 2, Florida. Number 3, Duke Blue Devils. Just an amazing season. I could see it end with a national title. Give me Auburn to be the winners of March Madness. Let me know your thoughts on my predictions down in the comments. What's your Final Four look like right now? What's that one sleeper team that you think can win it all? I'm interested to hear. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.